So this is configuring Gatsby Source Shopify. We need a few environment variables. For now, I'm going to get rid of this. We'll just fetch the products. These environment variables here you would get from Shopify, from the Shopify private app section. And this is just mainly stuff that we need in order to communicate with the API. So I need to copy an environment variable file over here so that, so this is reading them. Actually, I also need to make sure that I'm including this. So that will read environment variables from my .env file, which I'll copy. All right, so there's my secrets, and to keep them secret, I won't show them to you, but this should actually be all that I need. So if I run Gatsby develop now, then we can actually see this doing our thing. So this is output from the from our Shopify plugin. It's telling me that we are executing this bulk operation against their bulk operations API, and it's pulling their API, waiting for the operation to finish, which we'll talk more about. We'll talk more about how this is designed. It's kind of a GraphQL API, but it's also kind of not. And we'll see a little bit more when we kind of take a deep dive we'll see a diagram and see more about how it works. But look, it already finished. So it got back 1,505 objects from the API. That includes some products and their variants and some other things. And now it's ready to show me the graph our Shopify data in GraphQL. So let's get rid of this.
Could you make your font size a little bit bigger, please?
Yes, thank you for reminding
Sweet.
me.
Yep.
So let's query all Shopify product, and we'll drill in to the nodes, and let's say we'll get the featured image and get the Gatsby image data for that. The Gatsby image data that comes from our integration with Gatsby plugin image, which is also a nice upgrade that this plugin has. Our old plugin does not feature Gatsby plugin image optimizations. But we'll get that, and we'll also get, I guess, a product title, and maybe we'll get some product variant information. So for each variant, we could maybe get the title and the price. And look, there's a whole bunch of Shopify data. And so I won't go into really, I'm not going to try to recreate this experience today. But once you have this GraphQL data, then you can really just start building out your website by querying the GraphQL layer and building your Gatsby pages out of it. I can pause right there, to see if there's any questions before I go on a little bit to, why we chose the bulk operations API and how some of this stuff is designed.
Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in chat. In the meantime, I guess for folks who might be new to e-commerce, can you explain the difference between products and variants?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a product, for example, so the easiest example is, you have a shirt, it comes in multiple sizes, or it might come in multiple colors. And so you'll have a variant for a small red shirt and a medium red shirt, or a medium green shirt, and so on and so forth. Someone does have a question in the chat. I've never worked with Shopify, so you basically use the Shopify framework just as a data source. So yeah, that's what we're doing in this example. You can build a monolithic Shopify site where you're using Shopify, as the data and the UI. But we're building a Gatsby site here, and so we just care about the data.
It looks like you've got one more question too. I use Shopify, Insanity, and Gatsby. Tracking inventory has been pretty important as purchases happen. Is that built in?
Inventory is not something that's currently built into the build side of things. So we don't get inventory information at build time. I think that's something that you're more likely to want to query from the front end. And so if this demo site actually makes use of the bulk API on the back end in order to source all of the product and collection information on the front end. So the back end is actually also returning storefront IDs. And so on the front end, you can link all that information up to the storefront API, and you can get the inventory information, as the user is kind of getting ready, as the user is doing their browsing, they can sort of see as they click through pages, is this thing still available or not? That's a great question.
It looks like you've got one more. When new products are added, do you have to rebuild Gatsby?
Good question again. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So for an incremental build, this is something that the new plugin supports that the old plugin does not. You can set up a webhook so that when a new product is created or a product is edited or deleted, that webhook will come in to Gatsby Cloud, for example. And then, the plugin will only fetch changes since the last build. And so anything that's changed or been added or deleted since the last build, it'll fetch that and update it'll update Gatsby's GraphQL nodes.
Awesome. Thanks. It looks like we're good on questions for now. So carry on.
Cool. So as I mentioned previously, one of the big pain points with building from the storefront API was rate limits. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was just investigate the admin API to see if it was a better fit. Now, the admin API actually has its own rate limiting scheme, and it also has very serious query complexity limits. So if you're not familiar with those, when you have a GraphQL query, sort of the more things you add on to that query, the more like nested children and the more connections that you add to that query, the more complex it becomes. And they have pretty strict limits in the Shopify admin API to how complex that can be. So enter the bulk operations API. This is how Shopify wants you to do it. If you're asking for lots of data all at once, they want you to use the bulk operations API. And what the bulk operations API is, it's kind of an API around an API. And so this is an example query. And what's in here is an admin API query. This is a query like what you would give to the admin API, except you'll notice there's no limiting information. So normally when you make an admin API query, you'd have to say, I only want the first 10 products or something like that, right? You have to give it pagination information. No longer in the bulk operations API do you need to do this. This is literally made for getting everything all at once. So you don't have to paginate through and get everything over and over again. But you'll notice that it's wrapped in this other query, right? We have this bulk operation run query that's actually a mutation. And you pass that in the query that you want it to execute, and it uses that query to do a big data dump. Okay. And so that data dump, we go back and fetch later. And we just get back all of our data at once. So that's how when I said earlier, it's like a GraphQL API, but not, that's kind of what I mean. Let's take a look actually at a diagram then of how the plugin is designed to use this API. So the API is divided into, you basically have different operations to get different kinds of data. So we have an operation to get product data, and we have an operation to get collections data. And so these are all represented over here on the left in these boxes. A single bulk operation has a query and then some processing logic that sort of figures out, okay, given this data, given this type of data, how do I make Gatsby nodes out of this? So you start with one of these bulk operations, say it's for products, and you take that products query and you send it off to the Shopify API. You ask it to start the operation. And then you see there's this looping here. So this looping, we keep on calling Shopify and we ask for the status of the operation. Are you done yet? How many objects have you dumped? Is there a results URL? All that stuff. So this is like a very small and cheap request. And so they don't rate limit this at all, right? You can call this over and over and over again because it's super cheap. Now, once you call to check the status and it says, yes, I'm complete now, I've finished my operation, then it gives you a URL. And that URL is where the results are stored. And so our plugin goes back to fetch the results from that results URL. The results all go through the processor for that type of operation, and then that processor makes nodes, and it puts the nodes into Gatsby. And then once those nodes are in the Gatsby GraphQL layer, that's when you're able to work with them. I'm going to pause again for any questions. Somebody asked, this is unrelated to Shopify, but I'm still curious, does Gatsby Cloud have similar build from Git support? So in Gatsby Cloud, you would go in and add a new site, and then you would choose like GitHub or GitLab, and you would authenticate with OAuth, and then choose a repository to build from, and kind of go through the steps.
You've also got one more question. Am I right? I can connect multiple Gatsby instances to one Shopify shop?
Multiple Gatsby. So you want multiple sites for a single Shopify shop. It's possible, but with the bulk operations API, it is a little bit problematic, and here's why. It's because, so I mentioned that all of their APIs have their own limits. Bulk API, the bulk operations API has a limit where you can only do one operation at a time for your shop. So that is the biggest challenge that we've run into developing this plugin. It's definitely the biggest trade-off. It definitely makes it hard if you want to have multiple production sites pointing at the exact same Shopify store. Cool. Great questions. Any others?
Not yet.
Cool. So let's talk about incremental builds for a minute. So I mentioned that an incremental build is different than a full build because it detects that we've built before, and it knows when we last built, and it's going to go back and get those data changes since that happened. Now, this isn't something that's possible in the storefront API, for example. We need to know what's been created and updated since the last build, and we also need to know what's been deleted, which we use the events API for. But I'm just going to show you real quick. When I run Gatsby develop with a warm cache, what happens? All right, so take a look at this output. This is different. It says initiated bulk query incremental products, and it did not get back any data at all. And that's because I have not updated anything. I haven't changed anything in my Shopify store. So instead of doing the full build, this goes and asks Shopify, what's changed since then? Well, in this case, nothing has. And so it's able to finish really fast. This is supported, as I mentioned, through a couple of different mechanisms. So for one thing, when we make a query to Shopify, we have filters. So you can add this query argument to your GraphQL query, and you can add these filters. So for example, there is a created at filter, and there is also an updated at filter. And so I can ask for products that were created at or updated at since a certain timestamp. That timestamp I'm saving in my cache. This doesn't handle delete, but for that we have an events API. So we can call the events REST API. We can get a list of events. If we specify which verb, so for example, I think the verb that we're specifying is delete. That's going to go back and get us all the delete events since this timestamp. And then we can go in through and delete all those Gatsby nodes, because it's going to tell us Here's the ID of the thing that was deleted, and here's the data type of the thing that was deleted. So this product was deleted since this time, and so go ahead and remove it from Gatsby. Now I can show you a Gatsby Cloud Shopify site. So this is actually using the same Shopify store that I was building with locally. And you can see this last build was a data update from Shopify. So somebody added a product, updated a product, the webhook came in, it built in 9 seconds, right? As opposed to a clean build, which takes a couple minutes on this store, right? It doesn't take very long. It's a fairly small store. It can take, it's obviously a function of how much data you have. If you have a really large store, maybe it takes 10 minutes or 15 minutes. But the point is that this incremental build can still be as low as 9 seconds. Sometimes it can be a little higher if it's maybe we're a little bit slower on the deploy side of things, or maybe it's waiting for another operation to complete. But as low as 9 seconds, I think even 6 seconds sometimes is what we've seen from these. And I think what I can actually do here, if we look at this build history, I can actually go into Shopify. And maybe what I'll do is I'll duplicate a product and we can see a new build getting kicked off in Cloud. So I'll go into this test product and duplicate it. And we'll set it as active right away. And now let's go back to the site details because, there it is. It's queued. So the webhook came in, it queued a new build. And yeah, we're totally in business.
While that's building, you've got a few more questions in the chat. Will there be example documentation of the hooks to use with Shopify?
Yeah, so I guess I have 2 answers to that. So my first answer is that we always give you the webhook URL to use. Now, if you're configuring this manually, you're gonna go into Shopify and there's a place in Shopify where you can create build hooks, and you want to add one to like products create and products edit and all of this stuff. However, we are enabling our Shopify Cloud integration. Let me actually see if this is already turned on in production. I'm not going to go all the way through. But okay, no, it's not here yet. Let me actually go into staging, because I know that this is enabled in our staging environment. I guess my point is that when you do this through Gatsby Cloud, we're going to install the webhooks for you. But you can kind of see, I can maybe just walk through what this looks like.
And what are the webhooks for? Like, what would you use them for?
Right. So the webhooks are what tells Gatsby Cloud that a data update happened and I should run a new build so that so that my new content shows up on the website. So yeah, when you're creating your site, there's this integrations part, and Shopify will soon be available on this list, and you click connect. Right now, we don't have OAuth fully configured, and so you have to go in to your Shopify site. There's instructions here. Log into your Shopify store, go into apps, manage private apps, and that's where you get the keys for this stuff. But you go through that and paste them in here. Later on, we'll have a tighter integration with an official Shopify Marketplace app that allows us to OAuth through all of this so that you don't have to copy and paste. But once you copy these keys over and finish creating your site, then those webhooks are installed automatically.
Nice. Thanks for that. You've got one more question related to incremental builds. Is there an option to enable incremental builds on Gatsby Cloud, or is it enabled by default? I've been using Gatsby Cloud for a new Gatsby website with V3 and headless WordPress, but it takes a full build while not showing the incremental build badge.
Sure. Let me see if I can answer that question for you accurately. So I believe that if I go into the site settings for this site, and go to builds, then I'm actually not sure. I think we used to expose a checkbox for this, and maybe now we don't. I think that some CMSs are supposed to be incremental by default, and some of them just don't even support it. And so there's no point in turning it on. But long story short, I don't know the correct answer to your question.
Yeah, feel free to tweet it at us, and then we can make sure to find the right person and get back to you.
Cool.
All right. I think that's all of the questions. Another plug to fill in the swag giveaway survey if you haven't yet.
So let's see, we got through why we chose the bulk API, some of the challenges around it. We talked about the architecture of the plugin a little bit. We showed building locally. We showed incremental builds. We showed a bit about the cloud integration. I honestly think that that's all I really wanted to demo. And so we can just have a chat from here, answer questions, or I can show more stuff if people have like specific things that they want to see. If I'm able to show it, I'd be glad to.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like Ward has answered the previous question. It looks like incremental builds are called cloud builds now. And if you're on a paid plan, they are enabled by default.
Okay. Thank you.
You've also got one more question here. Is there a way to filter products from Shopify before the build? I only need a few in my project and I'm forced to fetch the whole Shopify catalog at every build.
I would say come to the repository, make a feature request in our issues tab, and we'll see if that's something we can support. I would say most likely via a plugin option, we would be able to allow you to say, I want to add this filter with this value, and we could add that to the query. It seems like something we could do.
There's another one about how many products can Gatsby hold? Is there like a max limit?
I don't really know. I do not know the answer to that.
Try it and tell us.
Yeah.
This might be a good place. I'll drop the link to the Shopify demo again. That one has, I think it's 10,000 products and 30,000 variants. So at least that many. Oh yeah, there's Jack in the chat. Make sure that's the right link. Let's see. Okay, I gotta scroll up a little bit. I love all the questions. Okay. One question, is Shopify Buy the best option for handling headless checkout? Also, did you run into any issues with TypeScript and missing types in that package?
The answer to the first half of that question is yes, I believe so. The answer to the second half of that question is I did not do any front end stuff with this at all. So I don't know. A different team worked on the demo, so you'd have to ask them.
Yeah, I don't know that the demo uses TypeScript, or at least when the parts that I poked around did not seem to be using it.
Sure.
But actually, let me pull up I'll get a link to the repo so people can poke around in there if they want. Let's see, while I'm doing that, here's another question. Typically, checkout exists directly on Shopify from Gatsby, which is fine. Are there any direct directly on-site checkout possibilities. So I guess checking out through Shopify.
I'm not totally sure I understand. And if I did, I don't know if I would have the answer either. Yeah, I mean, the checkout experience is admittedly something that I'm going to be a little bit more ignorant of. I'm really been focused personally on the building side of things, making sure that that we can get all the data to build the site.
Okay. Here I've got a link to the demo repo. Okay, let's see. What else are we talking about? Here's another one. Is there any integration with Shopify plugin data?
I don't know anything about Shopify plugin data. I can tell you that anything that's available from the admin API, we can definitely get. If we're not including it now, let us know, file an issue. If it's not available from the admin API, then that's going to be a much bigger challenge. But, either way, always feel free to come and file an issue, request a new feature, and we'll let you know if it's something we can support.
You've got one more about examples. Can we see more GraphQL bulk data examples?
More bulk data examples. Are you looking for data, or are you looking for a query that we're using to talk to the API? I'm not totally sure what kind of examples you're looking for, but I'm happy to go through them.
Queries.
More queries. Yeah. All right. Let's just go straight to the plugin if I can find it. So, as I said, each one of these is wrapped in this bulk operations query. And so the query that you see being interpolated here is an admin API query, and that's being wrapped in this bulk operations query. It'll tell us, the ID of the bulk operation and the status. It'll tell us if we made any errors in our query. Specific queries then. For example, our products query. So you can see right away, someone asked about filters. We're already adding some filters, right? We only want active products, and we only want products with a certain published status. If a date is supplied, then we only want products that were created at or updated, after that date. And so we assemble all of our filters, and then we assemble this products query. And that's pulling back. We try to pull back everything that we don't need special permissions for, or everything that doesn't require like extra arguments. Like, for example, some GraphQL fields would actually require arguments or something. So we're not pulling back any of those. But simple, scalar fields, we try to pull back all of them. Featured image and featured media, we pull them back. We process them with Gatsby image data. We're pulling back variant information, SEO information. We're pulling back all of the images associated with the product if people prefer to see the entire images array, various meta field information, meta fields on variants too. Collections is a similar thing. We're adding some filters to it and getting back. We ask for all the products that are available on a collection, and I mentioned that every operation type could have some custom processing. So this is an example When we get back all these products, we already have sourced the products. We just want the IDs so that we can make like a linking, linking products to collections. So we just save all of these product IDs to the collection node, and then we're able to tell GraphQL how to resolve that. Collection meta fields, so on and so forth. I think that there's really only one more that we're currently getting, and that's the orders. Now, collections and orders are both opt-in. Arguably, maybe collections should be available by default. It seems most people want them. But we started with opt-in. Orders are opt-in for a good reason. It takes a long time to process orders. If you have a busy Shopify site, lots of people order from you, then it's going to take a long time to source that information from the API. And so far, we haven't had much demand for it. But you can opt into this, and this will get back all of the orders and all of the line items that were attached to that order, and the product ID for that line item, and so on and so forth. And yeah, those are all the queries that we're currently giving to the bulk API today.
You said you can opt into that. Is that in the plugin configuration, or where do you do that?
Yeah. So all of the plugin options, I guess, are shown here, and Shopify Connections is the one that you would want. And actually, in this example, you can see that I'm including the collections. And we could also, include orders here, for example.
Nice. Oh, Ward says, is it helpful to open Graphql and show the data? I guess for some of those queries, what kinds of stuff comes back?
Yeah. And so when I ran this, I did not. Let me run it again. I think with collections included, so that we can see that data, because we've already kind of looked at the product data, and there's not a whole lot beyond that currently. So Shopify Connections should include collections. And then let's go Gatsby clean to clean the cache. And then we'll start over. So we're getting products, and that should only take a minute or so, a minute or less, and then we'll see kind of this same output for the collections. I mentioned too that only one's allowed at a time. So if I were running this on production right now, for example, if my production site were running an operation, this would wait for that. It would tell me an operation's already running, I'm waiting for it, and then when it's finished, it would start over. But now you can see it did the collections too. So it sourced a bunch of those nodes. So it's almost finished with its build now. And then we can go into GraphQL, into Graphql. And let's just query the collections. I think I have to reload this actually. Collections. And we'll get the collection title, and we'll get a product count, I guess, and maybe we'll get all of the product. Let's see, products. Yeah, we'll get all of the product titles. So yeah, there's 49 products in this collection. Obviously, must-have products. I have to have my Hot Wheels Star Wars flight controller handheld accessory. Some other cool things like, so I mentioned meta fields. You have meta fields attached to products and variants and collections. And so you can actually see all of them. Let's just do this. So, I only have like one Shopify meta field, but if I had if I had meta fields on products and variants and collections, like I could see them all here via this interface, or I could query them individually. So they have concrete types. So they kind of have like concrete types and abstract types, which is a pretty cool feature. So yeah, there's a lot we can do here. And heck, I mean, we can drill in with this collections query, right? We can drill all the way into the products variants again, and I think a product variant also has some image data, doesn't it? But I don't even see it right now. Well, anyway, the scheme is fully linked up, and you can just kind of drill all the way through to it. Yeah.
Sweet. Let's see. Do we have any other questions in the chat about Shopify or plugin things? I guess, what was the most challenging thing about working on this plugin update?
Well, I really, I mean, for starters, I really had to forge my own path with it, because this bulk API is unlike anything that we've ever consumed from a Gatsby plugin. So really learning how their API works and making that work with Gatsby was a huge challenge. But I guess the other one that I would continue to call out is the operation limits. That's a challenge, especially for when it comes to collaboration. So that's an ongoing thing. Ways that we have to find to work around two different like maybe a branch building at the same time as production. And so we've kind of introduced concepts of priority builds for that, so that if it's a production site, it can cancel the operations for a branch build, for example. That's one of the features of the bulk API, is not only can you ask, is there an operation currently running, but you can cancel it. But you have to be careful about that. Whose operation am I canceling, right? And so that's why if you have two production sites, they'll be trying to cancel each other if they try to run at the same time. So that's where the really problematic piece comes in. So we're hoping to maybe work something out with Shopify on that front. Stay tuned. But that continues to be the biggest challenge for this.
Nice. If you had to distill any sort of key takeaways for folks who want to integrate this into their Gatsby sites, what advice would you give them?
Advice. Gosh.
Or common pitfalls, things to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, definitely be aware of the operation limits from the get-go, and make sure that your team understands them too, and figure out how you want to best work with that. Maybe you're creating test stores to use in development, right? Or you're like making copies of your store. Definitely be aware of that. Also be aware that this is a release candidate, right? We haven't officially replaced the last Shopify plugin yet, right? So this is still in development, and so be understanding of that and patient with us, and please file issues if you have them. We really value the feedback that we've gotten so far from the community. They've helped us steer the plugin in the right direction, and so please speak up if you have issues, if it's not working the way that you think it should. I mean, you're the one you're the Shopify customer. You're the one who knows what data you need and what you want it to look like. So please tell us.
Nice. The Shopify source, Gatsby Source Shopify repo is the best place to open those issues?
Yes, I want to be clear about that. So yeah, there are. This particular one is the one you want, Gatsby.js/Gatsby Source Shopify. There is another one of these in our mono repo where the old plugin lives. This is where the new plugin lives, and you'll want to file your issues here, which you can see many people have already done. And I like to think we've been pretty good at addressing them and making sure that we're solving your problems the way that you need.
Oh, it looks like you've got one more question. So trying to get this clear, the bulk data API isn't part of the returned GraphQL query.
Right. So when you query the bulk API, the data that you get back doesn't look like this, right? When you send this mutation, right, this bulk operation run query, when you send this mutation, the data you get back doesn't look like this. It looks like this, right? Now, eventually, I mentioned that we're polling. So after we created this operation, we poll. Eventually, it gives us a results URL. Even then, the data is in a different shape. So the data is in this JSON-L format, and let me see if I can find a better description on here of what it looks like. I believe on this page, it will eventually show us what each line looks like. Download result data. Here we go. JSON-L data format. So when you make a query like that, you get back results that look like this, line by line. Okay. And so we, excuse me, we call to the results URL, and that returns a file, that returns this JSON-L file, and we read in all of these contents. We parse it one line at a time. Parents show up above their children, not necessarily immediately above their children, right? But for example, all of the product variants for this product are going to show up somewhere below that product. And so Shopify recommends that you read that file in reverse to make sure that that you can collect everything that you need before you get to the parent. But yeah, this is what the data looks like. And so we are reading it, literally reading it one line at a time. And in some cases, we create a new Gatsby node out of it. Not in all cases, right? Like, so I mentioned in the collections processor, that's a little bit different. We're going to see a collection, and then we're going to see a bunch of products underneath that. And we'll take those products, we'll just grab the IDs. And instead of making a node for that product, the node already exists. We're just going to grab the ID so that we can link the collection to that product and say that these two things are related.
I think there's a follow-up question to this. Import bulk operation run query from which plugin? Is this is what the Shopify plugin uses, or do they need to use this in their own site?
No. You don't ever worry about this. We're worrying about it so that you don't have to. No, I mean, you saw what I did, right? I created a new Gatsby site. I configured the plugin, and then I just ran it, right? I didn't tell it about the API. The plugin knows about the API. It goes and gets your products. You don't have to care about that. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's the beauty of plugins, is it keeps you from needing to worry about a lot of the nitty-gritty stuff. Is this ready for production use, this plugin?
I think that I think we are using it in production here, maybe.
Hey.
So yeah, I mean, honestly, like, that's what we want you to tell us. It depends on your use. It might depend on your use case, right? It's still in development. I think it serves our purposes for a production site so far, right? We believe in dogfooding this stuff and make sure that we can build what we need out of it. And so far, we've found that we can.
Okay. Oh, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Oh no, I'm just saying that there's more questions.
Oh yeah, it's good. Keep them coming.
Sure.
Does the new source plugin still have Shopify queries as an option where you can customize the queries?
No, it doesn't. If that's something that you like really need, then again, let us know. If you're saying I want the product query to look like this instead of that, I suspect that it's going to be hard to make that work well, right? If we replace our products query with yours, Could you run additional queries? Like let's say you want to get some data type that we currently don't support. Could you supply your own? Maybe. We could look into supporting that. It depends on what the data looks like and what you need out of it. Like, I mean, if it's simple if it's like one-to-many relationships, like a house has many doors, and so you're querying all the houses and all of its doors. Then our default naive processing would probably work for that, and it would create it would create some nodes for you. We'd just have to enable a little bit of plumbing for that. But no, the answer is right now it doesn't. We do not support that, and it's something that we could look into if you tell us more about your use case.
Sweet. How much faster would you say that this version is from the old Shopify plugin?
I guess I have not tried to quantify that. Here's what I would say. I would say for a clean build, I don't know how much faster it is, but I know that the build succeeds. That's the important thing. Okay. So with the old Shopify plugin, builds did not succeed, especially like for large stores, right? And it was because of the rate limits and all that stuff, like the rate limiting and the just hammering the server with those pagination requests when it's rate limiting. So having a plugin that actually completes the build is what we're going for there. It might not be faster. Like if you have a small store and that small store uses the old plugin and goes to the storefront API to get it, maybe it could be faster, right, than using the bulk API. I don't know, but probably not by much, right? It would be negligible. But the important thing is that this is actually reliable when you get to larger stores. Now, the incremental builds is where the speed gain comes in, okay? Because we couldn't support incremental builds in the previous plugin. So now when you get a webhook, right, your site builds in seconds, right, instead of having to completely rebuild the whole thing. So that's where that's where you're getting some time.
Oh, and Kirsten says that millisecond page load speeds and 16 times faster build times is what we clocked in our own tests.
Wow.
So,
well, I'm glad
not too shabby.
I'm glad somebody's measuring this stuff.
All right. Any other questions? We're getting close to time.
I'll add one more quick detail. I mentioned that the new plugin uses the Gatsby plugin image. So that's by default. And that it has been a huge speed boost for people's builds. People really like this feature. It lets you fall back on the Shopify CDN for the images. Whereas the old plugin was downloading all of the images up front and running them through Gatsby for processing. So running locally, you might want to still download them. And there's a plugin option for that. But by default, you're going to get significant speed boosts just from the image processing improvements alone.
Okay, you've got one more question before we wrap up. I only use Shopify data for titles, price, variance, and inventory. I use Sanity.io for all product information, descriptions, images. Are there any steps needed to get only that info aside from the queries?
It's a pretty common use case to mix another CMS with Shopify. Our experience so far has been that lots of people are using Contentful with Shopify, for example. Now, that the answer is no. You can't tell our plugin to ask for less data, for fewer fields, right? We're going to get back all the fields. Does that take longer for Shopify to finish their bulk operation? I actually don't know. I haven't run experiments like, ask Shopify for one field versus ask them for 100 fields and connections and all of that stuff. I feel like the biggest difference in time is probably just, proportional to the number of products that it has to dump. But I could imagine that, when you're adding, connection fields or child fields, non-scalar types, if they're going to the database for that, that's a bigger database query. And so, yeah, maybe it takes a little bit longer to run the operation. I don't know. But no, currently we don't allow you to sort of trim down the fields that we would ask for from their API.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on and chatting with us about all things Shopify. Are there any last things that you want to plug, or where people can find you online?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter if you want. I don't know why anyone would want to do such a thing, but I'm Sawtooth. I'm Sawtooth Samo on Twitter. You might see me in some other communities as Saxy Mofo. If you see that handle, that one's mine too. But no, other than that, I mean, thanks a lot for having me on. It was my pleasure to come on and plug the thing I've been sweating over for the last few months here.
Yeah, totally. If you are interested in learning more things about Shopify, we've got a webinar coming up on, when is this? Thursday, May 20th at 8 a.m. Pacific. So I will drop a link to that in here. Thanks, Kirsten, for the reminder. So yeah, if you have more questions, muse on them and bring them to that webinar. And we will talk to you later. Thanks all.